Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. I'm sure you're all familiar with the green dialed Rolex Submariner being referred to as the Hulk. Today I present you with Shrek versus Yoda. The 43.5mm Oris Aquis green dial versus the 39.5mm Oris Aquis green dial. Now, first of all, big shout out, big thank you to Oris Australia who loaned me these two pieces for review. I was expecting them to send me some scruffy beaten up review samples. They sent me two brand new fully stickered watches. So what I thought I would do today is I would peel off the stickers for our mutual benefit and entertainment whilst talking about the brand Oris. I'm wearing an Oris. I'm currently onto my 5th Oris, so it's a brand that I clearly have a bit of a thing for. Also talk about the Aquis as a model. I haven't owned one as yet, but I have got extensive experience with the GMT and with one of their Great Barrier Reef special editions. And then really today is about a size comparison. One versus the other. Which do I think is better for my 7-inch wrist? Which would I recommend to you if you're interested in picking one up? Let's get on with it! If this video doesn't get demonetized by either DreamWorks or Disney or both, then the YouTube algorithm clearly isn't doing its job. So Oris Australia sent me two watches on loan, but they just sent me the one box for them. It's the same across both models and some of their other models as well. I picked up my first Oris towards the beginning of 2018, so just a couple of years ago. But if you're a regular on the channel, you're probably aware that I've gone through not one, not two, but 3 Oris Divers 65s, finally settling on the bronze bezeled version that I was wearing in the introduction to the video. Beginning of last year, I picked up a Big Crown Pointer Day 80th Anniversary Special Edition, flipped that and swapped it for the bronze dialed version at the beginning of this year. So I currently have 2 Oris in my collection. Really interesting brand, Oris. They've been making watches since 1904, so well over 100 years of history behind them. They've been making watches in the same factory in Holstein in Switzerland since the 1920s, so clearly found something that works for them and didn't feel like moving. Like I said, I haven't owned one of these Aquis yet myself, but I have borrowed a couple long term. Both of them being the 43.5mm version, so I'm keen to see how it compares to its little brother, the Yoda, today. Let's peel off some stickers. There we go, one box fresh, shiny 43.5mm green dial Oris. I think that one looks fantastic. Let's do the same with its little brother. Well, I must say I found that thoroughly satisfying. Let me give these ones a bit of a clean up and size them up for me. Alright, done and done. Cleaned up and sized both of them for me. So what do I think about this particular model, the Aquis? Well, I think the Aquis would be a great choice if you were moving up, if you were buying your first kind of entry-level Swiss luxury piece. These are about $2,000 US list. They come in at just about $3,000 Aussie or a little bit over, which I appreciate is not a drop in the ocean to most people. However, I think it's a pretty solid offering for the money. And don't be frightened to ask your Oris dealer for a bit of a discount. I think that's something that I should be emphasising, but not so much that I would get in trouble with Oris Australia, who loaned me the watches. Now, your eyes are not deceiving you. There are slight colour differences between these two, both of them kind of similar tones overall, but definitely the smaller watch has a slightly paler green colour in the centre. It's kind of green-black on the big guy and a quite bright kind of mid-green on the small one. So moving on, I'm going to do dimensions and specifications briefly, and then wrist shots, and more wrist shots. So 43.5mm in diameter for the big boy, 13mm thick, roughly 50mm lug to lug. Now, integrated bracelet. Kind of 24 at the first link, tapering down to 18, back up to 20 at the clasp. And this one sized up for me weighs in at 167 grams. So a decent chunk of weight for a decent chunk of watch. 39.5, the same, 13mm thick, but only 45.5 lug to lug. This one, again the integrated bracelet, effectively about 21, tapering down to 16, back up to 18 at the clasp. Sized up for me again, 137 grams. So the same thickness, but obviously a dimensionally proportionally smaller watch and 30 grams lighter on the wrist. Both watches, all stainless steel construction, ceramic bezel inserts, 120 click unidirectional rotating dive time bezels, and plenty of lume. I'll put up a double lume shot here in the same order that I'm showing you the watches. Shrek on the left and Yoda on the right. BGW9 and an impressive amount of it all over the dial and hands. The Oris Aquis has done very well for itself in previous episodes of Lume Wars, the GMT actually winning its episode. So no complaints about the lume on either of these models. Case finishing on both models is excellent. A super fine horizontal brush on the mid case. Now the crown guards are actually replaceable. I'm not quite sure what you'd have to do to the watch to damage the crown guards to the extent that you'd have to replace them, but there you are nonetheless. Nice, good size, grippy Oris branded crown. The whole thing feels really solid, very nicely done, as you'd expect for the money. Both bracelets have an interesting mixture of brushed and polished. Brushed in the centre, high polished on the outer edges, which is kind of the reverse that most companies go for. That will mean that it will scratch up slightly more easily than if it was an all brush bracelet. Obviously, nice clasp though, that high polished chamfered edge, Oris logo deep etched in there, double security pushers, proper mill clasp obviously, and we have divers extensions on both of these watches. 300 meters of water resistance, screw down crown, double domed sapphire crystal covering the dials of both obviously. Both watches feature the same 26 jewel automatic hacking and hand winding Swiss made movement. They call it the Oris 7730. It's a Sellita 200 with a big red rotor strapped onto the back of it. I guess that's a bit of a double-edged sword for this model. 2000 US for a Sellita 200 is nothing spectacular, but it is a solid proven movement. It's reliable, it's all you really need in a watch anyway. And they're easily serviceable. You don't have to take it back to Oris if you've got a 5-10-year-old watch and it's not economically viable. It's like an old car. Anyone can service one of these, any watchmaker worth their salt. And I think it's a clean and legible dial, which is just what you want from a dive watch. They haven't overcluttered it at all, I don't think. Applied indices nicely in proportion. You've got the Oris logo under the index at 12, 3 lines of text including the Aquis name and that depth rating. Above the colour matched integrated date wheel at 6 o'clock, again enhancing the symmetry and the overall look of this one. Printed minute track all the way around the outer edge and just Swiss made either side of that truncated index down there at 6. Nice handset. They've revised the hands on the Aquis a couple of times over the years. I think they've just about got it right here. Nicely in proportion. Under macro, as you can see here, it's all clean. All the edges nicely refined. That's one of the main differences you notice when you spend more money. Everything looks really clean and well applied under macro. So I think a great first luxury watch, and arguably there isn't really much need to go beyond this. You don't have to. I would definitely have the Aquis over the equivalent price tag or Longines, that's for sure. There are a couple of moans and niggles though, a couple of cons to this one. Integrated bracelet, some people love it, some people hate it. It's super comfortable in operation, but you're not going to be swapping it out for the straps you have lying around the house, maybe 20mm, 22mm on the larger model. Now, Oris have gone some way to resolving this one in recent years. They've added integrated rubber straps and integrated leather straps, but they are more expensive and they're not the ones that you've already invested in. And the movement, as mentioned, it's a base model Sellita. I've reviewed a dozen watches at less than $500 US with that in it, so it is not the star of the show here. But overall, I think a lot to like about the Aquis regardless of which one you do end up going for. But which one should you go for? Let's get them on wrist. Starting with the 43.5, as discussed, I've had a couple of long-term loans, especially with the Great Barrier Reef 3. I ended up having that one for about a month and wearing it as my daily. Really nice, comfortable watch in operation. I don't mind the integrated bracelet at all. I'm happy to kind of forego the ability to swap them out for the excellent fit that you get from this. Conforms to the wrist nicely, drops straight away. Normally I would go for a slightly smaller watch, which is why I was keen to do this comparison to see how the two compared. But in my time with the larger model, I've had no problems with it at all. And that's the Yoda. I haven't adjusted the camera angle at all so you can get a direct comparison one to the other. Now, I've got a couple of smaller dive watches in my collection already, most notably the SKX 013. And I was really interested to see how this one compared. I think the key dimension, it's not really about the diameter. The diameter's a visual dimension, but it's about that difference in weight, 30 grams lighter, and you really do notice the fact that this one weighs in the 130s rather than the 160s. Still looks great, still a really nice, cohesive, well-proportioned design overall though. And that's the proper overhead shot with the big boy. Obviously it's a diver, so you get supreme legibility with these. It is quite blingy though, the Aquis. Mentioned it earlier on, those high polished outer edges to the bracelet, that super ceramic, the sunburst effect, some polished surfaces on the upper edges of the bezel as well. It is a watch that's going to stand out, so make sure you're all right with that if you're interested in one of these. And there's the smaller one. Again, I haven't adjusted the camera angle so you can get a direct comparison. All those surfaces, all those shiny surfaces playing with the light, I guess they make it look like you spent a bit of money on the watch. It does look a bit flash, but if you have just dropped £2 on one of these, that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? Now I'm going to take them both outside for a comparison in natural light. You also get to see a kind of different angle, how you would probably look at this watch if you were wearing it on your own wrist. I've got a 7-inch wrist, which is pretty much average. 43.5 as discussed, normally larger than I would like to wear, but that integrated bracelet really does help this watch wear on smaller wrists than you might expect it to. 167 grams, again heavier than I'm used to, but not something that I felt overawed by. It didn't feel clunky, chunky or top heavy. And here's something I don't normally do, one for you below the knuckle guys. That's one of the issues with a big watch though. You know, you are going to restrict your wrist joint movement, especially with a bigger watch. I do tend to wear smaller and lighter watches looser, bigger, heavier watches tighter so I can wear them above the knuckle and you don't get that restriction of movement. From Shrek then on to Yoda, let's have a look at the smaller of the two, the 39.5. Now dive watches, because they have that rotating bezel, which is always maybe 4 or 5mm thick, that means the dial isn't as big, giving the impression overall of a smaller watch. Now a bezel-less 39.5 will look larger than a dive watch visually. That's kind of what I'm saying here. So it does look perhaps a bit smaller than you might think. But again, a small watch is something you get used to quite quickly, and that lightweight, for me anyway, is a bit of a boon. I tend to prefer my watches slightly lighter rather than slightly heavier. Again, for you below the knuckle guys, that's it down there. Smaller watch, less restriction on the wrist. I'd be more inclined to wear this one looser as discussed. So Jody, what is the conclusion today? What on earth are you going to say to wrap up this video? Well, look, both great watches. I would be delighted to own either of these long term, and I think they are real kind of long term choices, the Oris. It's a kind of sensible choice. As discussed, that movement, perhaps not the star of the show, not all that spectacular, but it's going to give you years and years of faithful service, and the rest of the watch is built to match. No problems there at all. I would be happy wearing either of them. The 43.5 was a bit of a surprise. Certainly the ones that I've had long term, I never looked down at my watch and thought, oh my god, it's too big. Whereas I think if you are transitioning from larger watches, the small one is going to take a bit of getting used to. But once you're used to the small size, I think if you have an average size wrist like I do, 7 inches or thereabouts, the smaller one is probably the better choice long term. However, there is a middle path. There is a third way. Oris have just released a 41.5 for those of you like me who were dithering between the two but can't quite come to a firm conclusion. Unfortunately, they haven't quite made it to these shores as yet. Hopefully next month I will get another loan from Oris Australia and I'll be able to give the 41 a full review as well. But I suspect that's not really going to help me. I'm going to be left with 3 Oris Aquis that I like and could easily wear on a daily basis. So there you have it, the big green Oris Aquis versus the small green Oris Aquis. I think both excellent watches, whether you're looking for an all-day, everyday dive style watch or you're making your first step up into Swiss luxury pieces. Which one you go for, I guess, depends on you. I think they're both very, very wearable. The 43.5, considering it's a big watch, normally would be too big for me, but I really do quite enjoy the size. Alternatively, the 39.5 I think still has plenty of wrist presence for a sub 40mm diver, which is not something you can normally say. If only there was a middle path, if only I had got the 41.5 in time to make this video. Perhaps I'll do that one again in the future. Thanks for watching, I will see you soon.